Well, the games continue to come thick and fast in this 23-24 championship season, and as a result, we are back for match day 10, as all 24 sides are in action across Tuesday and Wednesday night. We are going to head through all of the games, give our preview, our score predictions, and encourage you to do the same down in the comments as well. And if you beat or match my score for the match day, you will get a shout out in the next recap. A massive thank you to everyone who's played along as always, and again, you can join in with the Premier League predictions and previews too. My Luton v Burnley preview is up in the eye above, and that's where I'll be on Tuesday, so I might not keep quite as close an eye on the championship action this week. I'm sure you'll forgive me for that, but for now, before we go and head into our matchday 10 predictions, let's go and have a quick recap of what happened at the weekend. Now, I've been keeping stock of this because there are 3 match days, including this one now, where I've not had a great outcome. The only 3 where I've not reached double figures this year, and they've all got something in common. They're after Carabao Cup ties, so I'm not quite sure what's happening. The first 2 rounds you can perhaps understand, but in this one, there weren't that many championship sides in action, so I'm not quite sure why it's having such a big effect on results, but it seems to be the only common denominator. 3 match days full of crazy scores and loads of coupon busters, and they all come after the Carabao Cup round, so we'll remember that for when we get to the 4th one. In terms of my outcomes though, it was a dismal weekend, and to be honest, nobody got more than half of the outcomes right in a championship. A lot of you guys managed to pick up the odd perfect score, most of you for the same fixture as well, and I went a little bit too ambitious with some of my score predictions, so as a result, 5 correct outcomes for me, but none of them converted into perfect scores, which means I was beaten by the following people down in the comments. Steve and Mitchell, 2 of the regulars, both got 6 with a perfect score for Cardiff. Going for 3-1 instead of 2-0 on Saturday seems to have cost me a lot of places in the table. Luke got 7 points with his perfect score also coming for Cardiff. W&G fan, you got 7 points as well, but your perfect score for Norwich's 2-0 win at home to Birmingham City. Wally got 8 points, certainly not a Wally this week, got the right score on Cardiff as well. Calvin, our new North East expert, got 8 points too. Correct scores on Borough and Sunderland. And in Chris, you have stolen the match day with 11 points because, let's be honest, to get 3 perfect scores out of this match day is an incredible effort. You only got 5 correct outcomes like me, but you converted them. Sunderland and Cardiff, 2 of your perfect scores, and you were the only person to get the Championship's favourite scoreline for Hull v Plymouth. So that is how we all got on for match day 9. Well done to most of you who beat me. And fair play to Chris. Double figures on a match day like that is not a bad outcome at all. Let's move on to Tuesday and Wednesday night though. And we begin with Birmingham City versus Huddersfield Town. 2 sides that were frustrated in the second half of their games at the weekend. Birmingham defeated 2-0 by Norwich after a pretty placid first half in that game. They did have a couple of good chances, but it was a crazy 5 minutes, and when you let in one, we talked about it with Watford last week, you can't then go and let in another straight away. So winless September for Birmingham after a promising start. They're back down in the middle of the table now, and that championship between sort of 4th and 22nd really is starting to tighten up, isn't it? For Huddersfield, a very encouraging first half against Ipswich. Really played well under Darren Moore in their first home game, and I'm sure the fans will take plenty of excitement from that. But the last 20 minutes or so, they got pegged back. They got forced into more defensive positions than they needed to be. And in the end, they were caught out. Ipswich probably deservedly nicked the equaliser, but still pretty encouraging signs for Darren Moore and another good point on the board. One of the correct outcomes I managed to get. For this game, I feel it's going to be quite tight. Birmingham not used to winning games recently. Huddersfield have shown encouraging signs under Darren Moore. They're going to play quite aggressively. Birmingham probably almost will play like the away side, and I expect this to peter out into a draw. I'm going to start off with it this weekend as I didn't throw it in enough last time. The Championship's favourite scoreline of 1-1 between Birmingham and Huddersfield to begin. Let's move on to the second one, which is Ipswich Town versus Hull City. Both of these sides were involved in the Championship's favourite scoreline at the weekend. Ipswich, we mentioned, a strong finish against Huddersfield, but in parts in the first half were overrun, and Huddersfield did create chances against them. For Hull, another pretty good display at home to Plymouth, but they're struggling a little bit to convert those draws into wins. We saw it again, it's 4 draws out of 5 at home for them, and going on the road might actually suit them better. They've won 3 of their 4 away games, Ipswich, to be fair, have only lost a game at home this year, and defensively they seem to be far more vulnerable at Portman Road. I'm looking at the way these two sides set up, and I know Ipswich have been formidable so far this year. They're doing brilliantly, they're great to watch. But I do feel Liam Rossinia's side might be able to take advantage here. There were moments in the last couple of games where Ipswich looked a bit leggy, and they looked more vulnerable than they have previously. There is a great chance they could go and outscore Hull. The Hull have been great on the road. They were excellent away at Stoke. And I've just got a funny feeling about this one. The Hull City might nick it. I'm going to go for a few goals again. I'm going to go for Hull to win by 2-1. And I'm aware, even in the second game, I could look silly for that. Let's move up to the northeast though, where Middlesbrough host Cardiff City. Two sides that are finding form, and their fans will be very relieved about it. Cardiff now up into the top 6 after beating away whipping boys Rotherham by 2-0. And Middlesbrough involved in that topsy-turvy game at Watford. But they did make it 3 wins in a week, 2 in the league, 1 in the cup. The goals are starting to flow. Josh Coburn picked up front this time and he found the goal. Riley McGree starting to look a star again. A bit worrying that they allowed Watford back into the game and did gift a number of good chances again. I think a lot of people have talked about Middlesbrough losing their attacking threat. No Cameron Archer this year, no Chuba Akpom, for example. 2 very high quality strikers. But defensively, there's not really an excuse for the way they've declined. They're still yet to keep a championship clean sheet. They've let in 17 goals in their 9 games. And that is definitely a concern for me because you just cannot predict them to keep a clean sheet. I do think they're going to win this game. And I'm going to go for the same prediction I went for last time out. I think Cardiff at home have been exceptional. They've got the best record in the league. But on the road, they've not been quite the same. 4 points, yes, fairly defensively solid. I think Borough have just too much. Again, it's another one that could go either way. There's a lot of very tough games to call this midweek. I'm going to go for Middlesbrough to nick it, continue their good run, and to win by 2-1 against Cardiff. Let's move on to sides that have had contrasting weeks. It is Plymouth Argyle versus Millwall. Millwall were stunned by Swansea with a 3-0 defeat at the Den at the weekend. A game, if you looked at the stats, would make no sense to you. It was probably a pretty even match in terms of great chances. Millwall definitely had more of the territory, definitely had more of the shots, but they weren't creating glorious chances throughout. Having said that, it wasn't a 3-0 game, but they were vulnerable to the counter-attack. They were vulnerable defensively, and it's something we don't often say about Millwall. We thought they found their form with back-to-back clean sheets, but against Rotherham and West Brom, they weren't tested quite as much. West Brom should have won that game as well, in fairness. Against Leeds, they got hit on the counter. Against Swansea, the same happened. And that will worry them going to Plymouth, because last time Plymouth played at home, they scored 6 against Norwich City. They created chances galore against Blackburn, but they do give up plenty of them as well. Now, I know Millwall have generally had a 0 in one of the columns in their fixtures in most games, but I think this is going to be thriller of the midweek, so apologies to fans in advance when this ends up 1-0. I've got a feeling this is going to be goals galore. Plymouth have been one of the sides to watch this year. Loads of goals for and against. Millwall, been a bit hit and miss, but they've got to go out and attack. They cannot play for a draw after their start to the season. They've only scored 7 in 9 games, but the goals are going to come eventually. I'm not sure it's going to be enough to win them this game. I'm going to go for Millwall to score 2 and still end up on the wrong side. I'm going for Plymouth by 3-2. Let's move on to two sides that shocked the odds and most of us in the comments at the weekend. It is Stoke City versus Southampton. There were messages going in when Stoke went 2-0 down as to whether Alex Neil would have a job for too much longer. But what a comeback they managed to produce there at Ashton Gate. Certainly wasn't a vintage performance. They didn't create bucket loads of chances, but they were ruthless and they got a result. And sometimes at this stage of the season, that's all you really need. Now, the other game probably was the biggest shock of them all. We put a poll out on Thursday alongside the predictions release and asked who was going to win this game. Only 19% of you said Southampton, and they were 3-0 up in half an hour. Now, I want to give a bit of credit to Russell Martin here, because some people think that I just want to get on his back, but he adapted in this game, and it's something I never thought I would see myself say about him. They gave up the ball at times, they let Leeds onto them, and they countered Leeds. And they got their front two into the game, which is all people have asked for, because Southampton can be such a threat at the top of the table if they do that. In this game, it worked an absolute treat. Adam Armstrong showing the quality he's got. Sulemana was great. Adams looked a threat off the bench as well. And Leeds, while they did have chances, and on paper it was a relatively even game, Southampton definitely looked the greater threat going forward. And that is huge credit to the way they adapted in that game. If they can keep doing that, they're going to keep picking up results. They're coming up against a side that have been a complete mixed bag at home. 2 wins, 2 defeats, and a couple of very big scorelines either way. So because I'm not quite sure what to go for, I'm going to go back to what Southampton were doing earlier in the season. When they were playing the opposition expected to finish in the bottom half, they were winning a lot of games late on by the same scoreline. I'm going to go for it again. Stoke City 1, Southampton 2, and don't be surprised if it's a late goal to win it. Let's move on to the final game of Tuesday night, which is West Bromwich Albion versus Sheffield Wednesday. West Brom produced what performance of the weekend to thrash Preston and end their unbeaten run. A 4-0 victory, a brilliant performance, started by a cracker from Darnell Furlong, but let's be honest, they absolutely dominated the game after that. They did play really well away at Millwall, but without scoring the goals and finishing those chances. And there are times where they're starting to look a bit of a threat. 3 draws in a row prior to that one. They emphatically ended that run. And now, because of the nature of the Championship, they're 3 points and 2 places off the playoffs. That's all it takes for Carlos Corberán's side. They're coming up against the side that virtually everyone wants to face at the moment. Sheffield Wednesday have had some solid days on the road where they've fought for a point like the Leeds one, but overall they've been a mess. Another 3-0 defeat this time against Sunderland. It was a very strange day, and let's be honest, we know the owner's statement really didn't help in the morning. Bit of a rambling rant that could have been left unsaid, certainly till after the match. And away at Swansea the weekend before, it wasn't a great performance either. There is nothing else I can see than a West Brom win. We know Xisco is going to end up being the casualty of what is poor management off the pitch. But you do have to say for Xisco, he's not got a defensively solid side. And that is the one thing he always managed to produce at other clubs. So for me, West Brom are going to win this comfortably. I don't think it will be a standout scoreline because West Brom, they're not going to score 4 twice in a row. And Wednesday will try and play quite cautiously. I'm going to go for a comfortable home win for the Baggies. I'm going to go by 2-0 to finish off the Tuesday night games. Let's move on to Wednesday and 2 sides that have very contrasting weekends. It is Coventry City versus Blackburn Rovers. Blackburn had a bit of a go against Leicester. I did watch that game just before recording this. They got back on level terms early, but defensively, they're just not good enough at this level. A free header from a corner for Wout Face, and they gave away another one 20 minutes later that should have been 2-1. But in the end, a bit of quality on the counter, followed by some hapless and pretty last-ditch defending. You just felt like Leicester could score as many as they wanted, and that is a big worry in recent weeks. Blackburn are conceding goals galore and now have the joint worst defence in the Championship. They're letting in 20 goals in 9 games, which just is not good enough. And whether it's home or away from home, you just do not feel confident that they'll keep a clean sheet. For Coventry, they ended a run of draws with a big win away at QPR. Perhaps not the most challenging game on paper at the moment, but they were the better team. They created good chances, and Ellis Sims looked a real threat in that one. We know it's going to take a little bit of time. They've got a whole new front line, certainly in that replacement for the Gyökeres role, which is never going to be a like for like. But they did look threatening. They're still a little bit vulnerable at the back. They've conceded in all of their last 5 games. But if there's one thing we know about Blackburn, they are going to give up hundreds of chances. If you go through their last 6 matches, including the Cup one against Cardiff, they've let in 17 goals. And it just isn't good enough against anybody. For me, Coventry have to win this game. They have to come out and play. And I can only see it being high scoring. You can't trust either to keep a clean sheet. So I'm going to go for 3-1 to Coventry City. Blackburn lost their keeper to injury at the weekend too. And if he's not fit, I'm sure that's not going to help their chances either. Let's move on to 2 sides that lost by 3-1 at the weekend. One perhaps a bit less expected than the other. It is Leeds United versus Queen's Park Rangers. QPR fall into the relegation zone with that 3-1 defeat against Coventry, which we alluded to a minute ago. Gave up chances, looked pretty poor defensively, and the way they're playing at home is definitely a bit of a concern. I feel this game may suit them better, which we'll get to in a minute. But let's talk about Leeds United, who played into Southampton's hands. All you had to do against Southampton at the minute was get through the first 10, get the crowd jittery, and you would have had a great chance of winning. They give away a goal in the second minute. They play into Southampton's hands, and in the end, it was just a completely unpredictable scoreline at the weekend. A brilliant win for Southampton, a very poor day for Leeds. And just as they were getting up ahead of steam after 4 clean sheets in a row, it is very much back to the drawing board for them. For QPR, this game is an interesting one because it's the sort of game where their fans aren't going to criticise them for going in, being cautious, being defensive, as they were to an extent against Birmingham City away from home. And if they can get a point out of the game, it would probably be considered a cracking result. The problem I have is that Leeds have got a goal threat, and surely they're not going to play like that 2 games in a row. I don't think this is going to be a great game, but for Leeds, it's about getting the result. And I think they're probably going to struggle to break down QPR, but they are eventually going to nick a goal, probably via Joel Pirro. I'm going to go for Leeds to win it, ugly, by 1-0. Let's move on to the table toppers, Leicester City versus Preston North End. Preston lost their unbeaten run in emphatic style against West Brom. A real off day, a real poor performance, but they weren't great against Rotherham either. This game, though, they were completely outclassed and they thoroughly deserved to lose it. For Leicester City, much the opposite, a thrilling win at Blackburn. Very concerning signs early on where they tried to play out from the back and got caught 3 or 4 times. And a side that were better in front of goal than Blackburn may well have taken some chances there. They got away with that, and on the counter, they just had too much quality. And that's going to be the case for a lot of games this season. I am going to throw a bit of a curveball here, though. After what happened to both of these at the weekend, everyone is going to expect Leicester to run away and win this. And we'll do it as the poll in midweek, and I'm sure about 60-70% will say Leicester win. But this is another game where for Preston, there's not the pressure to be the expansive attacking side, which perhaps against West Brom and Rotherham there was a little bit more. In this game, they can sit back, they can be efficient, they can frustrate Leicester, they can try and hit on the counter. And against the odds, I'm going to go for a bit of a surprise here. I don't think Leicester are going to lose this game. I'm going to predict their first draw of the season, the Championship's favourite scoreline of 1-1. 3 to go then as we move on to 2 more sides that had contrasting weekends. Sunderland against Watford at the Stadium of Light. Sunderland bounced back from that surprise defeat against Cardiff, in which they were the better side but just couldn't put the ball in the net, with a very comfortable 3-0 win at Sheffield Wednesday. But what a season Jack Clark's having. The game was over by half-time, and in what could have been a difficult atmosphere, Sunderland made sure that Sheffield Wednesday struggled. A really good performance on the road. For Watford, they did all the hard work. They fought to get back into the game after a dismal start. And then when Middlesbrough on the ropes, what did they do? They threw it away. A 3-2 defeat for them. Some really worrying signs coming along now. And if you're Valérien Ismaël, you're probably looking over your shoulder. Rob Edwards was sacked at the exact same point of the league season last year, with Watford up in 7th place for not being good enough there. Watford now in 20th with 9 points from 9 games. Definitely cause for concern. There's an international break coming around. I'm going to stick my neck on the line now and say Ismaël leads at least 1 win in the next 2 matches. And away at Sunderland, it's not going to be easy. Of course, Sunderland's slightly better away from home, if anything, but they are going to have a real threat here. And if they get the first one early, they could really get Watford on the ropes. They've not always had a big goal threat this year, Watford. You get 2 or 3 in a game, or you get a couple of blanks in a row. I'm going to go for Sunderland to win it. I'm going to go for them to keep a clean sheet. 2-0 for the Black Cats. The penultimate game of the match day is on Wednesday night. It is Swansea City versus Norwich City. Swansea were brilliant in a 3-0 win at Millwall. They were ruthless on the counter-attack. They somehow managed to keep a clean sheet. But despite the fact it's back-to-back 3-0 wins, they have given away some very good chances in those games. So don't want to get too overexcited defensively, but definitely a lot better going forward. Whereas for Norwich, a really good 2-0 win against Birmingham. Not the greatest of games, and they did give up a couple of good chances again. But crucially, after that defeat at Plymouth, they managed to keep a clean sheet. And that 5-minute spell early in the second half was a great way to get a win under their belt. They needed it after 3 defeats in all competitions, and they're back up in that playoff mix as a result. But for this game, I just feel the defences are fairly weak. The clean sheets are a little bit deceptive. And going forward, I feel both attacks will be stronger. So I'm going to go for one of the thrillers of the week again. Certainly the best game on Wednesday night. I'm going to go for the 2 sides not to be separated. Swansea 2, Norwich 2. And the final game, it is home comforts for Rotherham United. They host Bristol City at the New York Stadium. Rotherham continued their dismal start on the road. The only team with no points in the Championship away from home. And they never looked like getting one at Cardiff. No shots on target. Gave up more great opportunities than they conceded. And on another day, it could have been 3 or 4. They've got to sort it out. They need to get home results in the meantime. and it makes this game all the more important. They host a Bristol City side that, after a good run for a little while, have produced the old Bristol City for a weekend. This is what we're used to knowing. A Bristol City side that shows promise but then provides inconsistency, defensive mistakes, and gives up silly chances. They've clutched defeat from the jaws of victory at the weekend, and have somehow managed to lose 3-2 after being 2 up in 15 minutes against Stoke. So they need to get back to winning ways, but they have picked up more points on the road this season. For Rotherham, home comforts have to be taken advantage of. Their only winners come at home, their only 5 points have come at home, and have been far better defensively at their own ground as well. This could be a lower scoring game, and I'm tempted to change my mind on what I've gone for. I'd initially picked Rotherham for a 2-1 win. I've got a feeling it might be lower scoring than that. I'm going to be gutted if I end up being wrong because I've changed my mind. I'm going to go lower, and I'm going to flip my prediction as well. I'm going to go for Bristol City to nick it with an ugly 1-0 away win. I've changed my mind at the last second. So with that done, let's have a quick recap of what I've predicted for matchday 10. Thrillers of the week include Plymouth v Millwall on Tuesday night with a 3-2 home win there. And on Wednesday night, Swansea City Norwich to draw 2-2. They're my 2 big scoring games. I've also gone for a surprise win for Hull City away at high-flying Ipswich, and Preston to nick a point away at Leicester, probably against the odds after the weekend. But those are just my predictions for matchday 10. Do you agree or disagree with them? Let me know in the comment section down there, and give me your predictions for matchday 10. As always, if you beat or match my score, you will get a shout out at the next recap, which will be on Thursday night ahead of the weekend action. Thank you for continuing to play along in your numbers as always. You can do the same with the Premier League predictions. My Luton v Burnley preview is up in the eye above. If you enjoyed this one, please do put a thumbs up on the video. Subscribe for regular content from the Honest Football Podcast. We'll be back with more Premier League and Championship predictions later in the week, and I'll see you back here next time, hopefully with some perfect scores.